Let's talk about vacancy for a minute. So, one of the most important things you need to be aware of is what is your average vacancy? And by that, I mean, what is the number of days or weeks per year on average that your unit sits unoccupied with no paying tenant? And it's also one of the most common questions we receive as a professional property management company. What's the average turnaround time that my unit's going to sit vacant? Or how long does it take to turn over the unit and get it ready to rent and find a new tenant? So let me speak to how to think through this as you're considering a property management company, or maybe even just comparing your own performance to, you're curious what is the industry average. So when a tenant vacates the property, within a day or two, our company heads over to the property and does a move out inspection. That includes taking detailed photos of all areas of the property inside and out for the purpose of assessing the security deposit, as well as just documenting what needs to be done to get the property ready to rent. And then once we receive owner approval to begin that turnover process, we'll go ahead and have our folks over there cleaning the property up, patching, painting, replacing carpets if needed, general punch out items. And we find that most turns are able to be completed by our team, assuming nothing crazy, no major damage or major upgrades or improvements. We find average is about 2 weeks, and that seems to be the norm here in the Central Ohio area. Is about 2 weeks to get a unit completely turned over, cleaned, and 100% rent ready. So then, of course, we'll immediately list the property for rent. And in terms of leasing time, this is going to vary quite a bit, even more than the turn time, depending on where the property is located, what kind of property it is, what time of year it is, and how much you're asking for in rent. So, of course, the more desirable a property and the more competitive the rent prices, the faster it's going to lease. In terms of overall averages, I think our average leasing time is a little bit under 3 weeks. We see, especially single family homes these days in nicer suburban neighborhoods, those are typically leasing in 1 to 2 weeks, we're finding, whereas larger apartment communities aren't as in high demand as they used to be. They may take longer, maybe 3 to 4 weeks. Again, depending on the time of year and how aggressive you want to be with the rent price. The other factor to consider here is you're going to have some outliers, right? So even if 90% of our units are leasing within 3 to 4 weeks, once in a while, you're just going to have a unit that for whatever reason isn't resonating with the rental marketplace, and it may sit for 6 or 8 weeks. That does happen occasionally, but it is by far the exception rather than the norm. So when you take all this together, you're looking at somewhere on the order of probably 4 to 8 weeks of vacancy every time the unit turns over, and that is to say between tenants. And at least for our company, that's really only happening in about every 3 to 4 years or so, again, on average. Every once in a while, you're going to have a property turnover every year for a few years in a row. Then you find a great tenant who loves the place. They stay there for 5 or 6 years. So a lot of things to consider as you're looking at overall vacancy, because some years you're going to have none, other years you're going to have 4 to 8 weeks. And so we find an overall good number to use as you're estimating vacancy or occupancy, which is kind of the inverse, is right around 94-95% is usually going to be a safe bet as you're preparing your numbers and looking at a potential investment.